Hello everyone, it's me, GamePenguin21, and today, don't you just love it when the universe again just hands you content on a silver platter and you're like, best to make this content because if I don't, it's gonna be weird. Um, Again, maybe it's just a me thing, but this week, apparently, Square Enix has decided that they're going to try to shift to a more multi-platform style strategy, i.e., they're going to release more games on all platforms and not just like one or two. And looking at the replies here and everything about that, it seems to be happening. Not everyone is happy about that, and you can guess who specifically is mad. Mainly the PlayStation fanboys, all of whom seem to think that going multi-platform is very bad for business. But as most normal people will realize, the more places where your product can be bought, don't you think that would make them more money in the long term? This kind of makes sense to me. But yeah, we're going to be talking about a lot of those people. But first, obviously, I have to do a little bit of the shill bit. So, I'm looking at 1K subscribers at the end of the year. If you would like to help with that, that'd be fantastic. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Everything helps me out, and you are all awesome for even just viewing my content. But if you want to support me in other ways as well, links down to my Bandcamp for my music, or to the Twitch down in the description below. So with that being said, let's get started. So a lot of people were talking about this, but the one that I have pulled here is the one by Genki, something like that. And basically, it just says what I initially said, where Square Enix announced shift to multi-platform strategy as part of their new business plan. The group will aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, PCs, especially in regard to major franchises and AAA titles, including catalog titles. Now, basically, that means that most of the focus seems to be going to be shifting to the fact that their games are releasing on all platforms and not just one, which again to any normal person would be, well, a good business move. But people like Samson Wick here says that the platform exclusivity is not gatekeeping. I highly doubt that, but go off, Queen, I guess. It's quality control. Multi-plat publishing requires resources which would otherwise be used to make the games better. It means overall quality will be diminished in pursuit of easier profits. Sad day. I saw the sentiment a lot recently, and it wasn't just Samson Wick here, that the entire quality of the game will start to dip because they have to go to other platform. I don't think that that's how that works, but just to give you a few more interesting examples here, we have Ace saying disappointing games like 16 and Rebirth are amazing because they are focused development on one console, despite the fact that I think 16 has now been ported over to the PC. So, I don't know, maybe, is it Rebirth? I forget, one of those two. I think it's Rebirth. With 6i here continuing this whole little trend bit, saying, I didn't see much of a difference, TBH. Most games sale on PlayStation and Nintendo anyway. Square is just going to waste X resources on PC and especially on Xbox. Past records have proven this. Yes, because again, porting over games that are years old and have the hype being died down, that's exactly a good thing, and not like, say, a day and date release where the player numbers actually ended up being really good. So, with Buck Breaker here being an interesting person, talking about how game sales won't make up the difference in the loss of quality, and a lot of their games are already really questionable. Again, to go back to what I said previously, all these kind of fall under the same thing of they're going to diminish the quality of their games, but overall it's in pursuit of profit, and that's bad. despite the fact that, again, 1, more people get to play the games, 2, this will generate them more money, sometimes, at least for the PC, in perpetuity, so long as they keep the game on Steam or wherever they decide to put it to. And 3, the piracy argument, which we will talk about in a bit, is kind of irrelevant, but again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Up here again, we have Risky Gumbler with, but why though? Square Enix games sold mostly on PS. If Final Fantasy had been a mega successful as a PS exclusive. And yes, a lot of people, and yes, this was another interesting sentiment where it's been mega successful in the actual PlayStation exclusive thing and quote unquote hit all the marks apparently, but again, they lost a ton of money on this bet, and even though we're going to talk about them growing, it's not that much of a growth. But if you are telling me that it's been mega successful as an exclusive, don't you think it would be even more successful if, say, it came to other platforms? Just kind of makes sense. If it's being very big and very bought on one platform, don't you think that you could exponentially grow and that the people on the other platforms would 100% grab it as well? Just kind of makes you think. So next up, we have a very interesting sentiment here, as I wanted to talk a little bit about at least the Xbox side of things, where Bubba kind of emphasizes one side of the weird debate that's dumb, but like from the Xbox people, at least as their representative for this video, I guess, he says that it sucks that PlayStation gamers don't buy games. It makes sense why they'll release to all platforms. PlayStation really going third party, even though, again, this has nothing to do with PlayStation. So, again, kind of shows you how far this guy has kind of lost the plot, but it's also funny because then a person by the name of DCT Man, or DCT Tan, says, makes sense to port games to PC and Nintendo, but Xbox didn't even buy their own first-party games, which, again, that old chestnut seems to be ringing in everyone's ears, at least in that context, when you're breaking it down to the people who don't understand what is happening in the gaming industry. But Ronan here, as I'm just going to call him because I'm not pronouncing that and butchering names, Ronan has a very stupid one here where he says, so an extra 300 copies on Square Enix games on Xbox and 2 million pirated copies on PC. Interesting. The problem with SE is bad business decisions. One of them was pulling Final Fantasy Remake into 3 parts. You'll be left with each iteration selling less copies than the last one. And I think that I agree with at least that second half, but that first half, like, dude, again, to just kind of go through this really quickly, 300 copies on Xbox probably is because that game was older or that game didn't capture the same audience, and that's still 300 sales that you didn't get out of the other platform. Definitely not a big number by any means, but it's one of those things where I think that that's a hyperbole and you're kind of dumb. But the 2 million pirated copies, those people were probably never gonna buy the game anyway. As people have said before, there's a lot of reasons why one would pirate the game. Not all of them is because they want to pirate, but again, 2 million is one of those numbers that's not the biggest when you think about the gaming industry, at least as of right now. We then have a Noon, which says, great news. Instead of being disappointed at that their game was selling 3 million copies in a week on one platform, they'll be disappointed with Final Fantasy 17 launching with 7 million copies in 3 platforms. That's still like a growth of times 8, which, I mean, that's a very big improvement. If you don't give a specified time frame here, right? But if it's the same time frame of 1 week, 7 million in 1 week is insanity. So that sounds like a good investment to me. Just kind of saying. And then, of course, we have here, which is Darkborn, which this is probably going to take up a very big chunk of this video because there is a lot to it. As you can kind of see, it's a very big modicum of an essay here. Darkborn basically comes in and says, I think it's funny how the bots are screaming that the PlayStation exclusives don't sell when they have a lot of multiplats that have 4 to 6% of sales, and they bullied an indie dev into making a video about the hate he's receiving over Xbox fans demanding games on Game Pass. To basically sum that bit up, at least that opening sentence, I don't know, the selling part I kind of recontextualized earlier here, but the video game that they're talking about that they're getting like quote unquote hate for is basically there was one comment that said it's a dead on arrival game for Game Pass for a game called Hypercharged Unbox. It's a game that's been on PC for a long time, but it's now going to be ported over to Xbox. And people are saying that it's going to be dead on arrival if it's not on Game Pass, which, again, is one of those things where that's kind of dumb because there are games that are not on Game Pass and they've done just fine. But him making a video on it was his own thing, and he was one of the developers for it. And, again, that to me is not the worst thing that you could have done. I mean, yeah, they gave him hate about it, but at the same time, the PlayStation fanboys have actually done much worse to developers, if you've seen the history here. Next up then, again, this is very long, so also we gotta remember the PlayStation Studios for the PlayStation, that PlayStation pays studios for an exclusive. So that payment, whether it be $20,000 to $100 million or so, as well as the free advertising at State of Plays, showcases are all around the world, like we see, is probably more than having to port a game to a platform that wouldn't buy their games. So 20 to 100 million to port over a game, is that what you're talking about here? I don't really think you understand how this business works at all. And you're saying like free advertising. That 20 to 100 million is probably the advertising budget as well. So overall, no. Plus, again, you're saying that as if it's a good thing that Sony is paying for this stuff. As we've established before, it's not a good thing. Them taking games away from other platforms doesn't help. And with the recent controversy with Helldivers 2, we now know that the market itself, for at least PlayStation, again, has that cap. 69-ish countries that can access PlayStation Network, aka the PlayStation brand. And again, since they're pulling it off of the storefronts to pull it off of that other thing, just to pad their PSN numbers, don't you think that that's still kind of stupid? Again, one of, if not the biggest reasons as to why this whole thing is just happening right now is, again, to make a long story short, their market cap is not high. It's not as high as it could be, and they're not optimizing it in the correct way. As someone who does marketing stuff, that's not how this works. Probably still at least see timed exclusives, some games going to Switch 2 depending on its hardware, then some games going to other platforms, then maybe PC day one or within 6 months, but all platforms day ones is bad due to having to spend more time on games and spending resources and money making ports for the lowest spaced platforms like the Series X or the Switch 1 and 2. And lower-end PCs. So we might see games go back graphically and take longer to release. It always seems to come down to the games are going to look bad graphically, like they haven't looked bad graphically at all. And this is also talking about where Only Good Games talked about if you think PlayStation exclusivity titles are bad, you're a clown, which I did not have the actual tweet for that. But if I remember correctly, he was specifically quoting a part of an article that started to talk about like the sales numbers and how they have actually grown, if I'm remembering the tweet correctly. And overall, that growth wasn't as significant as people might expect it to be. I think it was about maybe a 1 to 2%-ish growth over the course of the fiscal years and stuff like that, which is not terrible, but like that's not good when you're a business. It went from like 73 billion yen, which was about 500 million US dollars, to a little over 90 billion yen, which comes out to around 600 million US dollars, because of how conversions work. Again, that's the rough estimate of what I remember, which that's not a lot when you think about it in terms of growth. So, interesting. I think the most delusional and interesting, stupid take of all of this is Days of 1989 saying, bring back console exclusives like in the 90s. Who's with me? Hashtag, and then a bunch of hashtags where he's retweeting this whole thing. And, dude, it's not the 90s anymore. Not only should we not bring that back, we understand now that it's not as sustainable in the current environment, because it's not helpful to brand image, it's not helpful to the brand itself. It doesn't get butts and people buying the console. It doesn't. People are like, oh, well, it does, and it should, and it will. And it's like, why aren't people buying it? Because they don't want to, because there's more options, and options are important when talking about things like the free market and stuff. But the next very dumb-ass take here is from OddAI. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you enjoy your stay. With a, I love this guy, he's spitting, talking about the Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. But he says, please include de novo Sony in this game. And then goes on to talk about the actual reasons as to why. You can kind of read this. It's a little short, but he's basically saying you need to include DRM because you don't want people to pirate your game. Now, knowing this, if you do import de novo into your game, you will automatically lose even more sales than they already are with the Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut. If you didn't know that they are actually delisting this from several platforms, or well, specifically from Steam, and specifically from the actual amount of listed countries that was there. It's now apparently over 200, at least at the time of me recording this. So that number might be up, it might be down, unsure. But allegedly 200-ish countries now can't have access to Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut because they can't make a PSN account. So you're already cutting down your small audience into an even smaller audience who want de novo on their computer. So, again, to quote like another earlier video, it sometimes has a mild inconvenience at best, but it can completely destroy your game at worst. So, interesting. And I think that that'll about do it for the end of this video, as I am very tired and my brain kind of hurts. So what did we learn today, ladies and gentlemen? Well, we learned that PlayStation guys are dumb and will continue to be dumb because of the fact that they just think that exclusivity is the way of the future, even though it's not, and you are stupid for thinking so. Overall, look, exclusivity is fine if you're running that sort of business, and I know that there's things that I buy that are technically exclusive, like U2s and stuff like that, but that's just a different business model, and you're getting a physical product because you can't like afford to kind of mass produce these things for whatever reason, which is fine. But that sense of the exclusivity thing isn't necessarily working the same way in the PlayStation industry, or at least in the gaming industry at all. Again, to kind of make a long story short, when you have an exclusive, you are already limiting your audience to that platform, and that's not a good thing if you're trying to make the most amount of money possible. You would want to bring it to as many people as possible, because in the end, that's how you make the most money. But in any case, like I said at the top of the video, this is a very interesting story to talk about. If you have any interesting comments or stuff, leave them down below. I'd love to talk more about this, because this is quite interesting and a positive change in the gaming industry. Finally, some positive news to talk about. But overall, I think that'll about do it. Like I said before, if you want to support me in other ways, other than your viewership, which is always enough, links down to everything in the description below. My name is GamPango21. Thank you oh so much for watching, and a peace off